Hi everyone, welcome back to Cardvoyant. I'm Kris and I'm your Cardvoyant, and today we're finishing our tutorial on the Cups cards with the court cards, and this means we will have finished all the tutorials on every single card in the tarot deck. That doesn't mean that we don't have more videos coming up, because we'll talk about a lot of these aspects of beginning to read, but here we are. So let's get started on the court cards with the suit of cups. First of all, we come to this page card. Now, I love page cards in general. Page cards are, they're exploding with potential and possibility. And you can see in this cups card, it's very sweet and sort of happy, and it's got these lovely bright colors. I love this page of cups. Now, of course, as we've talked all through these tutorials on the cups cards are about love and emotions and feelings and all those things from our, emotional side and the emotional side of life. Well, this page, as you can see, is standing here in this lovely, blue toned tunic, holding a cup. And oddly or surprisingly, coming out of that cup is a fish. So, as we know, pages often represent potential. They're the beginning of things, and they have the idea of something that can grow, or just something that's like inspired in the moment. Well, this page stands in front of water, and we know that water always sort of symbolizes our intuitive selves, that deeper, eternal part of our nature that runs through all of us. And this page has it openly running behind him, because he's in touch with that. He's not actually touching it, but it certainly runs through his psyche. And this fish is, fish also can symbolize this creative energy, this psychic energy, and it's also symbolizes those things, those formative things, our imagination, and in our imagination. And simply because this fish has sort of unexpectedly leapt out of this river that runs behind our figure, but through all of us, it's talking about this surprise of inspiration, or just surprise in our lives, our imagination, these new things that sort of burst forth without warning, that can talk about creativity, imagination, these feelings and emotions, psychic talent sometimes. Now, often I'll get this card in readings where people are talking about romance in particular. Um, Most often about the coming of romance into their lives, or maybe about a new relationship. And this is a promise and an affirmation, because this is this surprising new thing, this potentially imaginative, creative, quite lovely thing, but it is potential. So it is this, when you're talking about romances, it is a promise that something may be very quickly coming into your life, and it has this potential, but it is potential. And so sometimes it does speak about romances that sort of come and go, that sort of have this wonderful, imaginative, creative, fun spark and beginning, but are temporary, as many things are in our lives. It speaks to that idea of things that can be transitory, these new inspired beginnings, lovely, inspired, wonderful beginning feelings that last and are wonderful, but then move on. And so there is this phrase that Wayne Dyer used to say, and I think of it when I see this card, and that is the idea of being attached to nothing but open to anything. And this page is open to anything. And there's some lovely beginnings and things that can expand and grow, or that can just touch our lives temporarily. So it's a very sweet card, a card of opportunity, a card of, attitude, of this feeling of youth and vitality, and wonderful surprises and gifts that can come into our life. And that's a wonderful thing, and it's a wonderful message to be able to deliver to your client or to yourself. Right. So next we have this very interesting knight, this Knight of Cups. And it's interesting to me because there's so many, all of the knight figures I really like. They're these wonderful figures, and yet they all come with their own kind of constraints or differences between them. And this knight is very much like that. I mean, it's this wonderful figure with a little bit of a shadow aspect. And we've talked about how the cards all have shadow aspects, if they're sort of like that overkill aspect. And this knight is no different, only different in the way that it may be more prevalent with this card, but more pronounced, that shadow aspect with this card. As you can see, you've got this knight here, and he's this wonderful figure on this, white steed. Um, he's a carryover, an extension of the page, a movement forward from the page, and yet, you can see his horse has this kind of slow gait, almost that sort of um, prancing gait, but much slower than some of the other cards, like the Knight of Swords or even the Knight of Wands. Um, and you'll note on the knight's tunic, he has this fish again, this fish symbol again, that's talking about um, creativity, but also this psychic, intuitive self. He holds the cup in front of him. He's sort of looking a little bit beyond it, and yet it's prevalent. It's what he's bringing forward and bringing forth. And he's also got his armor, as all the knights do. So this knight is talking about bringing forth these emotional things, and sometimes a relationship, sometimes, these creative plans, sometimes these sort of intuitive, internal psychic endeavors that were mentioned in the page. And he's bringing them forth. And what he's bringing to them, in part, is what is represented by the wings on his helmet and at his heel. Because these are, speaking of loftier ideals, this is talking about deeper relationships than we have with the page, but it's also talking about altruism. It's talking about humanitarianism. As you can see, his hand is not gloved, the only knight without a gloved hand. And this talks about, it's sort of symbolic of the way that his heart chakra is extended. It's from his heart to his hand to this cup. This is very much about him being a rescuer in some senses. I mean, that's the kind of personality that you would get with this figure, is that idea of sort of being the rescuer, this gallant, noble knight that runs in and truly wants to help. The part that can be the shadow aspect is that this knight can sometimes be a little too dreamy, right? A little bit caught up in the dreams and in the idea of a dream, and so not moving forward, not actually kind of doing the work. But again, that's a shadow aspect, because in basically, and in truth, and in most of the readings that you'll give, what this is talking about is that kind, caring, um, gallant, almost noble figure that is really trying to do the right thing. And in a relationship reading, or when you're talking about someone's asking about a relationship, this is kind of like a whew, as long as it's not venturing too much into the dreamy, because it's like, this is a true caring individual. And if somebody is asking about somebody that they're seeing, maybe, or even the coming of a romance, the blossoming of a romance or relationship, this is kind of wow, you've got a really good person here. And it even though it comes across as a knight, this can be male or female. It's nice to know that this knight is in touch with that, what we think of iconically as the feminine or the divine feminine. He understands that because he's so in touch with his heart. So this is a very sweet card. As I said, that the horse in this is not rushing in. So it's that idea of sort of a careful, a planning, sometimes patience required in the relationship, but it's a good thing because it allows a time for growth, a time to really get to know the other person. And this Knight of Cups, is a person well worth knowing. Well, you guys, this Queen of Cups is a wonderful card. It's such a, if you get this card for someone you're reading for, and you feel that it's like them in particular, this is like such a statement about the kind of wonderful person that they are. And I will say that often, very often, when I'm reading and I get court cards, they do reference a specific person. I mean, I do have that feeling that they're a specific person. Um, if it comes at the top of the reading, it's often talking about the person I'm reading for. At least that's how it works for me. As you go through and begin reading more and more, you'll have your own kind of you'll come to your own set of um, things that are true about your readings, like the way that you interpret things. But for me, I often find that the court cards are specifically people. That doesn't mean always, because they can talk about situations, they can talk about even places, or jobs or things like that, because those are sometimes feelings of actual things or actual beings, So because of the way they affect us. But this queen is so well-rounded, so beautiful. You can see that she sits on this lovely throne with the cherubs that symbolize this sort of childlike innocence, but also love. You can see also with the cherubs that the one cherub holds the fish. We've got this fish theme, this psychic, creative fish theme running through all of these cups court cards. And she's here at the sea. I mean, this is not like a river or a stream that runs through some of the cards. She's at the sea, this bounteous, vast nature of her psychic abilities, of her inner self, the way that she's in touch with it, her inner self and her subconscious, her depths of experience. She sits here with it all sort of laid out before her and very much literally in touch with it, right? She's holding a very different cup. Her cup is closed. It's the only cup that is closed. And this talks also about the way that she has um, built up this experience, this wealth of knowledge, this nurturing, sensitive, creative, intuitive self, and holds it in a place that is hers. Right? She sort of owns these feelings, recognize them, recognizes the worth that they hold, and holds them dear, and so therefore has cupped this cup um, to to encapsulate this and hold it dear and sort of preside over it. Um, she is a figure who people look up to. She's in many senses a healer, and that can be just, through words. Like she's the person you might come to with your problems. Very much mothering, nurturing feeling. She's unafraid of those feelings as well. She's unafraid of her inner psychic self. She's unafraid of the depths of her intuition and her subconscious, her soul. She is at peace with them and also able to utilize them. This is the Queen of Cups is one of those people that could walk into a room and meet, several people and have a very strong feeling about each of them. Like, oh, nice to everybody, but I would not trust this person. There's just something untrustworthy about this person, or the sadness in this person. She recognized that yearning or sadness within a person immediately. And that's because she's so in touch with this psychic part of herself, this intuitive part of herself, that she doesn't need anybody to tell her or explain somebody's personality to her. She just feels it, it comes to her. And that's because of the depth of her understanding of this inner self. You'll also notice that this queen, unlike the knight that we just saw, who's sort of like dreamily staring sort of above the cup almost, she is staring, rather, the Queen of Cups, intently at this cup because she understands this power that dwells within. The cup itself almost has this church-like or sort of sanctified feeling about it, the structure of it, the way that the artist has depicted this cup. And that's truly what she is understanding, that this is this knowledge, this sensitivity, this creativity, this inner self that she has brings forth into the world, this peace within herself is important, and it's worth encapsulating and holding dear and looking intently at for knowledge and for understanding. And she uses it wisely. People who come to her, family members, friends, this, as I said, this is a motherly figure, that come to her in this sort of matriarch role. She understands that they are in search of something that's dear to their hearts, and so she holds this cup lovingly, intently, and without willingness to let anything out that diminishes the importance of what's held within this cup. So it's a very um, accomplished uh, figure in this cup. And you'll get this often, as I said, I get this for particular people. And when I see it, it's just such an acknowledgement of who they are. Sometimes people, will be asking about um, others that have moved on, that have crossed over into the non-physical world, and you get the depth of emotion associated with that person and the relationship that your client had with that person when you see this card. It's profound, and it's so deep, and we all have these very deep emotions. This card is symbolic of having come to understand, appreciate, and utilize those very deep emotions, that very deepest part of ourselves, that intuitive soul part of ourselves. So it's a special card, It's, and when you get it, you've got a special reading it and a special client. Well, we've made it. Here we are, to the King of Cups, the last card in our exploration of the Cups cards. And this king is an interesting and kind of wonderful card. I do love the queen. I will say that. I love the queen card, Queen of Cups. But this is kind of just a slightly different take on that same type of power, but a slightly different taken what you might expect to see in a king card. Now, this king, again, has this fish symbolism. He wears his fish around his neck. We'll talk about that in a second. Also, notice that he's holding the cup in his right hand, but in his left hand, he holds a scepter, right? He's got this water running, all around him. He's kind of in the depths of the sea that the queen was sitting on the shore of and dipping into, and he is surrounded by it, right? He's in the depths of it, but he doesn't touch it. And that is probably the most telling thing about this king's card, because this king is in touch with his psychic nature. He does have his creative self very much before him, as symbolized by the fish necklace. And yet he is a little bit separated from it. And there's a reason for that. It's because this king is mature, responsible, accomplished. He is very much centered and disciplined. And so everything about him, this creativity, this psychic self that he wears around his neck, is disciplined and very much aware of his stature and the way in which people look up to him. And he has that. That's why he holds the scepter, even as he holds the cup, because it is this idea of responsibility. Now, behind him, you can see there's a red ship on one side and this fish, again, jumping out of the water on the other. And this is a reminder that these things, this creativity, this passion symbolized by the ship on its journey, and this impulsive or intuitive, this almost impetuous creative energy symbolized in the fish coming out of the water is there also. The thing is that this king has these within him still, but he has learned to sort of regulate things. He's very, as I said, aware of his responsibilities, his his kingliness, right? And so he, while these things, these cups, this emotion, and this scepter, this control, are there, he has to blend them together to create this responsible self that, again, people come to, but for a slightly different reason that they come to for the queen, right? It's not so much simply emotional support, the sort of eternal soul support that so often is associated with the queen. This is also very practical support. This is, can be a very fatherly figure, but often I'll get this figure of speaking of like bosses or things like that in relationships. It can be very comforting to some people, right? Because they want this or they need this in their lives, this loving figure who also is disciplined and very responsible. In fact, many people really yearn for this and need this in a partner, right? The one who can be loving and yet is also responsible and doesn't let things get away from them, doesn't let people take advantage of him, doesn't let his emotions take advantage of him in many ways. So it is this interesting blending. Now you can see that this king is looking neither at the scepter nor the cup, he's looking ahead. And this is his idea of sort of the place that he holds in life and looking to the future, but also to what he has created in his life, right? And it's very important to this king to have structure and to have responsibilities in their proper place and to have this discipline. He is directing his creativity in certain ways, right? So it's rather structured, where the queen figure is a little bit more ethereal. And so you get these two sides of this sort of ultimate expression of cups cards of emotions, and they're equally valid, and they're equally valid at different times, right? Now, if we're, as I mentioned, if we're talking about actual people, this can be a frustrating thing to some people, but it can also be a very welcome thing to other people to have this discipline and this control and this sort of systematic way, in many ways, of living. Um, there can be sometimes this feeling of, as we're talking about shadow aspects, kind of sometimes being non-communicative, and that's because this king is very sure of himself, right? He likes his structures, and he knows kind of what the discipline looks like for him, and so that can be sometimes difficult for other people. um, but the queen, on the other hand, can be the shadow aspect, can be that not enough of that, right? Not enough of that discipline, relying almost overly on this inner self and sort of trusting it when this king says, yes, I trust it, but I am going to set this down and lay this forth and follow this path that to me is very, constructive and confined, and goes a certain way and doesn't uh, take too many risks, too many chances. This king is not that big risk taker. This king has an idea of how things should be, even creatively, but executes them in a rather disciplined, responsible way. So that's that can be, as I said, a very good thing. This can talk very much about like jobs where there is that sense of structure, and yet it's a very good job, and it's good for the person that you're reading for, or for yourself, and offers this creative potential and love in a certain way, but also within these constraints that your client then has to think. I mean, there is this indication with this card that this is a good thing for your client. In fact, a very good thing. But we all have to decide if we're going to deal with that, if those are constraints we can live with, or if that's something that we want to break away from and sort of go back more to this Queen of Cups figure. So there you have it, with this very centered and wonderful king card, the last of the cards that we have explored. There are a lot more things to talk about in each of these cards, but as I said, it can be overwhelming to present too much, and I hope I haven't presented too much in these cards, that you just can get the basic feeling for them. You don't even certainly don't have to remember every single detail that I've talked about. You just the general kind of feeling will help you as you begin to read. So, going forward, we'll talk more about moving into actual readings. We'll talk about cards, we'll talk about shuffling, we'll talk about spreads. And if there are other things that you're wondering, please send in your questions, leave a comment, and hopefully we can get to those too. I am sort of trying to figure out how to do and what they would look like if I did tarot classes in groups or individually. So I'll try and figure that out. So because I've had several people email me about them, and also just asking comments and stuff about them. So that is something I want to do. I need to work to figure out the structure, and a little bit of this King of Cups in me to kind of figure this out. So until those things start to happen, I hope that you've enjoyed these tutorials. I hope you'll be able to, go back through them for refreshers if you need them. And I especially hope that you'll be able to begin, if you haven't already, begin using tarot cards to help you tap into your clairvoyant nature, which is what cardvoyant's all about. So until our next video, I hope you'll enjoy some of the other reading videos that I'm doing. I hope you'll subscribe so we can together learn more. Keep commenting, get in touch with me if you'd like a reading. That's the information's all there on my website, and I'd certainly love to read for you, and then you could see how I really do a reading. But until then, continue please on your tarot journey, and take care of yourself, take care of others. Bye for now.